All right, before we begin here, I had Revelation chapter 12 was torn out, and I was trying to show you earlier on in the series how it describes this woman going to the moon, about this birthing of this child, of which so many people are trying to teach you is the Messiah. Okay, it's not. It's the Antichrist. And you will see here that Zechariah is going to fulfill that. Ain't going to tell you that. And when we read this back into Revelation 12, when we go over it basically verse by verse, it's not going to be right now. You're going to see that. But right now, just going to briefly show you the connection here of Zechariah 5, basically starting here at verse 5, describing the ephah as the vessel that's associated with the woman, associated with the body of false Israel itself, further symbolized with Ishtar. And then we have, of course, that wickedness, line 8, that was cast into the midst of the ephah, into the midst of the woman, into the midst with Israel. And then we have the description of it being lifted up, and the stork, fulfilling it with Revelation 12 is about that woman in travail. Of course, we know the stork symbolism to this day symbolizes childbirth. We know where it comes from now, right here, the ancient scriptures. And then, of course, verse 11, the gate. The gate means so many things. The gate in, the gate out, in through the outdoor. Right, Led Zeppelin. I think some of us are beginning to understand your double speak. Right, in through the outdoor. And nonetheless, there's Shinar. That's this place. They're to build this place, this house in the land of Shinar. It shall be established. We know that Jashin, he establishes the connection with how even Israel was established through this connection to Boaz, through the connection to the serpent, among other things, amongst the sacred feminine, to produce the Elite race, eventually that became the Israelites as they see themselves. Okay, and then set upon her own base. Unreal. Like I said, base. Moon base. Set upon her own base. Just does not get any more intense. All right, so if we were to go to Revelation and we go to chapter 12, it's important to keep in perspective what we remember from chapter 11. Chapter 11 was about them bringing that fire from the sky on that figurative described city that is supposed to be like Sodom and Egypt, the place where the Lord was crucified. We know that's Golgotha. It's not Jerusalem. It's Golgotha. And then we correctly identified that with New York City, the 5 points, the 5 boroughs, everything as Zechariah describes. So we get this destruction here in chapter 11. And I told you that they leave after the destruction. And we see that as it was mirrored within verse 12. As I said, that it means double, that it's talking about the people that they sacrificed, and then it's talking about them, the sacrificers, where they're going to go to escape this calamity that they've caused upon the earth. Now, you should also know that the chemtrails are part of this, because once this millstone hits and these nuclear power plants get destroyed and or go offline, we already know from the Fukushima situation what that has caused. Now imagine hundreds, if not possibly up to 1,000 of these things going off all over the place, not just the United States, because I don't believe that this destruction is going to be just localized in the U.S. alone. I think that there's going to be multiple other places that will be targeted or hit, but in general, the actual target point, the bull's eye, pun intended, will be New York City. It will receive the full blast, the full millstone. But don't think of this as like a planet killer. It's not. It's a city killer, as NASA has been correctly describing, putting this kind of buzzword. If you're researching this through what NASA at least is reporting with the current events, they're calling the possibility of these smaller meteors that are less in size than the asteroids to be city killers. That's what they're calling them. And that's exactly what the scripture would fulfill them as well. That's going to be the millstone that would destroy that great city. So NASA is correctly basically revealing what the nature of prophecy is before us. And we've got these things that are associated as millstones that are described as city killers. Okay. So if you put into perspective that the destruction has happened in the city, and then at line 12, we see that Israel, the second reflection, Israel itself is now going to the moon. Well, now you have the fulfillment of that in chapter 12. The woman, Israel, the woman clothed with the sun and the man-child. Don't forget what you saw about the woman in the ephah, that vessel. Now, who is the woman? The woman is Israel, right? Now that woman is associated with Ishtar, because when we describe Israel, we're describing the mother of Israel when we say the woman, and the mother of Israel is known as the Queen of Heaven. Now this Queen of Heaven is also known as the Queen of the Night. Now the moon you would associate with the Queen of the Night, because the moon is also double. The moon is both light and dark. The moon is both male and female, at least from their perspective, figuratively. So Ishtar being the queen of the night, being associated with Israel, Israel's mother, and then they go to the moon, it all makes perfect sense. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered. Now the trickery that goes on with this next line here in line 3 and all through this is absolutely astounding. They have taken ancient scriptures that is concerned the fall, the original fall of Lucifer from the heavens, and they have made it and applied it like this fall is taking place in Revelation. But just to let you see right now, without going into great detail, how this is being falsely applied to Revelation, you have to remember the serpent's there in the beginning of Genesis. The fall has already taken place. The fall has already taken place in Genesis. So these are scriptures that would be more appropriately associated with the Genesis account and the original fall, which has put our civilization into this direction that we now are, basically within this materialistic society known as Babylon. If you want to understand that better, watch a video series that I did entitled Ye Shall Know Them by Their Fruit, and you will be able to easily see that this system is built upon this fallen deception. So there's so much here that it would take us away in perspective to what we're talking about, but just realize that this is where the editing of the Bible comes in. Scriptures have been applied from another place to confuse the reader, to not understand who this woman is and what child she is actually seeking to bear. Because Jesus Christ does not come back as a child. He does not come back as a man. He comes back in his spirit glory. It is testified to over and over again by the disciples and the Bible itself. Now, you know that the Antichrist is hoping to seeking to fulfill himself in material form. He does want to appear as a man. He needs to appear as a man in material flesh. He is trying to prove that he can succeed in the very act that the Son of God has succeeded in himself, in fulfilling himself as his very creation. So this mimicker, the illusion, has used this occultic bastardized science to produce himself into the material world, and he's used false Israel, i.e. the fallen nations of the world, to do this great work to bring him about. That's the full details of the story. So as you can see, the woman being described as Israel. I don't really want to name any names, but I mean, golly, people, there are so many people leading you astray. It's happening right now. The strong delusion is happening. It's happening. It's in the Bible. It's already set up in the Bible. And these people are just following the script. They're just following the program and hoping that you cannot correctly divide the word and hoping that you do not form a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, the Spirit of truth. How do you do that? You see him as perfect. You see him as perfect. Once you realize his perfection, then you can see the perfection and where the perfection is not. Because there is no wrath, there is no vengeance, there is no jealousy in one who is perfect. All of that is based upon these fallen ones. So, all right, Israel chapter 12, after the destruction, going to the moon. As I said, some of these YouTubers have already uploaded videos describing the constellation, the sign of Virgo. And Virgo, of course, we've had some very particular fulfillment with Virgo as of late, which does connect and reflect with these scriptures, but in a lesser manifestation. But just to get you to at least see that the connection through the sign Virgo associated with the zodiac is connected, as I've been trying to help you guys see, as related as Israel, this woman Israel, the mother of Israel, as Ishtar. Just simply Google it. Google Virgo is Ishtar, and you'll see it. You will see the evidence. Virgo is the virgin, as we know that Ishtar is the virgin simultaneously as the whore. And this is where we get all of this flip-flopping with the mirror, and of course we get the association with the moon as double. Now the moon, of course, being double is backly or correctly associated back to Yahweh as being the masculine portion of this association with the moon that is further identified with the Babylonian moon god Sin. If you have some patience, you will see that I'm going to begin to show you the stuff in the scripture will be correctly identified just as I described. All right. Now, there's Ishtar going to the moon. There is this place where this child will be nurtured for a time before he will come and be prepared on our world and revealed as the herald of the Messiah. And of course, it's going to be the fallen prince. Because Israel, you got to remember, they rejected Jesus Christ from the get-go. And they know who their God is. And they have been working hard to produce him into this material world. All right, so now you see that, and you should easily now begin to see what verse 9 is all about. Then lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, there came out two women, and the wind was in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven. Of course, there's the moon. Then said I to the angel that talked with me, whither do these bear the ephah? And he said unto me, to build it in a house in the land of Shinar, the shining one, the illuminated one. Sin means shining. Sin is the Babylonian moon god. And just as the Spirit gave me the sight over 20 years ago, absolutely 100% precise. It's coming from the moon, and there they are, planted on the moon, the house of Israel. Okay. So, set upon her own base, and we're going to come back. We're going to come back and look into all this. We're going to break down the words. We're going to look into the definitions from other outside sources that are not associated with my opinions. And you will see all this stuff come together perfectly. All right. That should be shocking, I hope. I mean, Lord have mercy. Do you realize what is happening here? I do. And I I just cannot describe it to you guys. I just can't describe it. All right, so maybe at this point, for the sake of some new viewers, I will do this. I will go to Ezekiel just real fast so you can see that who this woman is that we're talking about, that I'm no liar, that when I tell you that this woman okay, when we look at verse 5, then the angel that talked with me went forth, saying unto me, Lift up now thine eyes, and see what is this that goeth forth. And I said, What is this? And he said, This is an ephah that goeth forth. He said, Moreover, this is a resemblance through all the earth. Behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead. This is the woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. Now you saw in Revelation chapter 12 who the woman was that was lifted up, that was associated with this birthing, this woman in travail. It's Israel, right? Just as we described. Now we have to just simply go back. They just never thought somebody would come along and give y'all guys this. They just never thought in a million years that it could have been done. I just hope that they see how it's being done. It's being done through the Spirit of truth, Jesus Christ. Jesus is real. I testify to that. Jesus Christ is real. And just don't take your lack of understanding as being somehow giving you the right to apply fault to how he runs the universe. No, it's your own lack of understanding that does not yet understand the fullness and the wisdom of how he is creating and perfecting this universe. And he's doing it all through free will, all through experience. Through your experience as you gain and you truly see that the manifestations that go against the proclamations of love your neighbor as yourself and love God with all your might, it creates a horrible place. A horrible place. So the Father's wisdom is going to be fulfilled. And in the meantime, we're going to gain this valuable experience as we have lived within this deception and then overcome this deception by our faith and by the leading of the Spirit through this valley of the shadow of death. We that make it through this with our faith intact, as the Bible says, will be glorified on the other side. That's exactly right. And then we will fulfill a special service and a special universal need in these distances of the eternity ahead, because we have already fulfilled a trust in ourselves while we were yet still material beings. And it was even a trust that these high spirit sons, Lucifer, Satan, and the devil, even with all their wisdom and glory, they themselves fell to. But we, being the lowly sons and daughters, material sons and daughters of God, that are clinging to this promise of perfection as offered us by the Creator, we're going to overcome their deception and their sophistry against the Creator's Son by our simple faith, by the power that we have, by the faith that we have in the truth. And that truth is good conquers evil. Amazing. Amazing. Chapter 19, the book of Ezekiel. This is going to tell you who that mother of Israel is. This is Ishtar. She is the blood vine. Listen close. Moreover, take thou up lamentation for the princes of Israel, and say, What is thy mother? A lioness? She lay down among the lions. She nourished her whelps among the young lions. Now, this is where we got Ishtar, because this is the perfect description of Ishtar. And I showed you guys that picture of that archaeological artifact. And there we have Ishtar. There we have Hathor. There we have Lilith. And the names go on and on. Ashtoreth, the Hebrew Ashtoreth, that's where we get the rendering further down the lane from Ishtar, this Babylonian deity, it's all the same thing. Now, here we have the fulfillment of Ezekiel 19. There is Ishtar submitting and connects and will bring us back to the sacrifice. So there is Israel, Ezekiel chapter 19. You don't have to listen to me. We can take it right here from the Bible if you can correctly divide the word. Moreover, take thou up lamentation for the princes of Israel, and say, what is thy mother? A lioness? She lay down among the lions. She nourished her whelps among young lions. Come on. And she brought up one of her whelps. It became a young lion. Now, you guys know what happens here. She teaches this young lion to catch the prey, to destroy and devour men. Now we know that a sealing takes place that is being recorded in ancient times. It's associated with binding them in chains. We know that all of this is symbolism for multiple things connected to the circumscribed tetrahedral geometry, even connected to the geometry and the geography of the Great Pyramid of Giza. As you see, it's being referred to in line 4. So the Great Pyramid is a location in which this binding and this sealing and this waiting place of souls has been created in very ancient times. And it still rests there to this day as a mystery, an enigma to supposedly our generation. But that's just because the powers that be are keeping you from understanding the truth. So anyway, the second line comes around. Basically, you need to think of a secondary age in this instance that comes around where she produces a new corrupt batch of these young lions' whelps, and she teaches them to do the same thing, to corrupt and devour mankind, to divert the generations of men from understanding the fullness of truth. And of course, we get the desolate places. Of course, all this destruction associated with the cities that associates with us with the locusts, that further fulfills Job chapter 24 and these wild asses as the onagers that cannot enter into the cities until they are laid in utter waste. And here we go, more about them being put inward, okay, inward at this place of Egypt, being associated with this king of Babylon. We know that this true king of Babylon that we're talking about is the king of Revelation chapter 9, Apollyon. And of course, we know that that's Enki, this fallen prince. Now, as we get down to verse 10, we get this better description of who the mother of Israel is. This mother of Israel, remember, Israel is fallen. Remember, Israel is Ephraim. Ephraim has fallen to the occult. You need to understand that. Thy mother is like a vine in thy blood, planted by the waters. She was fruitful and full of branches by reason of many waters. All right, and then of course the connection with the strong rods, we already looked about that. That's in connection with the caduceus, that rod, that serpent staff, all being symbolized with the genetic descendancy and the right to rule. All right, that would be the rights of succession. And of course we know that Ephraim considers himself to have the right to rule because he has this Egyptian royalty through his mother Asneth, that was the daughter of the high priest of Heliopolis, On. Okay, the sun temple. All right, so as we go down, I'm going to save you the description of every verse here because it just takes too long. And if I say something that you don't understand, I'm kind of compelled to go back and find other verses that show you that I do understand what I'm talking about. So I've already covered this in other places, but just simply look here in verse 13. And now she is planted in the wilderness in a dry and a thirsty ground. From this place where she's planted, this wilderness place, it's Shinar, it's the moon. It's the moon, right? Who's planted up there on the moon, right? And then we're going to show you that that's their Zion, and that Zion, its most ancient rendering, means a dry place. That's amazing. Okay? And now she is planted in the wilderness in a dry and thirsty ground. trying to bring water to the moon, right? And then you have to have water if you're associating a woman with birth, because that water that breaks is associated with the woman in travail. It's associated with the birth, right? It all fits. From this place where they're dry and thirsty, where they're planted, that's where the fire comes forth. And fire is gone out of a rod of her branches. Now, who's the rod of her branches? From Genesis chapter 49 or chapter 48, 49, out of Jacob's own mouth, that is exalted above all of the other progenitors. It's Ephraim. Ephraim is the one that's been given the rod or the scepter, the right to rule. You have to watch the video series, Ephraim and Manasseh, or do your own research into Genesis chapter 48, 49. Okay, fire is going out of a rod of her branches. That would be these torn olive branches associated with Ephraim, associated with the United Nations, associated with false Israel, associated with the woman on the moon. Okay, get that? And a fire is going out of a rod of her branches from this dry and this thirsty ground. All right there from Ezekiel. So who is the woman? The woman is Israel. The woman is the queen of heaven. The woman is Ishtar. The woman is this connection with this corruption that begins in the most ancient of times. That's right. So now you can listen to these agents bicker back and forth on this channel till thy kingdom come, because they are going to do it. And it just brings me to something now. Maybe you guys don't understand why I let them do what they do. Look, you got to understand, Jesus Christ's word is for everyone. It's not for just a special select few. It's for everyone. And these people are a part of this philosophy and this doctrine of false Israel. They're connected to these secret societies. They're connected and affiliated to these doctrines. And they are doing their best to maintain their own understanding as they try to prove what I'm sharing with you guys is untrue. Because if I'm left uncontested, that means everything that they're hoping on, that they're believing on, everything that they've been taught is wrong. So they have to find some way to belittle me. They have to find some way to make it look like that by showing some sort of fault in the messenger, that his message is untrue. And that's what these lesser footmen are doing right now. And they're not even doing a great job. I mean, I'm just simply the messenger. I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be perfect. I'm a man. And just as ancient seers in the past were selected from among men, so too in this day also. Okay? I walk by faith. That's the only thing that probably separates me from other people that could receive, is that they don't have the faith. They don't have the faith to bear this truth and then to act upon it, because faith is an idol. Faith is action, my friend. Faith is living, breathing, moving, experiencing truth. It's not bound. It's not dead. It's not sitting in a book waiting to be discovered. Faith is living. Faith is new. It makes all things new through the truth in Jesus Christ. Understand that. Understand that. So I don't block them. I don't block them because they don't defeat me. They don't harm me. They can't harm me. I believe that it's good practice for everyone. These are just the footmen. If you are going to be wearied by what these people post on these comment pages, then you are going to fall to the sophistries of these mighty ones. Okay, so these guys they're just great practice. Just do your best as you see them profess their lack of. Pray for them. Basically, this is your ability. This is your way to find out who needs to be prayed for right here. And so many of them need to be prayed for, plain and simple. They are our brothers and sisters. Many of them are incredibly intelligent. incredibly intelligent, and incredibly creative. I find myself so often, easily liking these people, easily wanting to be friends with these people, easily wanting, wanting there there are there's wickedness in high places. And that could relate us right on back to the moon also, huh? But beyond the moon into the spiritual realm, we have wickedness that has set itself against the creator son of this universe, and has instilled in the doctrines of men the early deceptions of which these people have founded their truths upon. Unfortunately, unfortunately, and they've been tempted by vanity, ego, and pride to believe that they themselves are some sort of god that has had this right stripped from them, and that if they can just get this world back in order, pun intended, then everything's going to be all right. But you don't get the world back in order by lies. You don't get the world back in order by deceit and treachery and deceptive actions and cursing and slandering. That's how the world got this way. So if any of these people that are doing these actions are thinking that they're helping the world, they're truly blind. And Jesus Christ correctly described them, that they're the blind leading the blind, and they're blind to the truth. They're blind to the simple truths of love, the simple truths of brotherhood, that brotherhood not bound by race, brotherhood bound by faith and spirit. Spirits don't have no color of skin, but they do have an affiliation of the truth within. And that truth is we all are one under the eternal Son of God through his living, manifested word, Jesus Christ. I'll be back.